All right, you guys, it's that time again. Let's talk about my favorite brand. Let's talk Skims. Putting on my Skims while getting dressed has now redefined my feel good, look good mentality. One of my favorite products of theirs is their Fits Everybody dipped front thong. This is the most comfortable article of clothing I have ever put on my body, hands down. I am not kidding. I swear to you that I have never bought another pair of underwear since trying these, and I don't plan on it. So shop my favorite bras and underwear at skims.com, and after you place your order, be sure to let them know that I sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another exclusive episode of Killer Instinct here on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. I hope you had a great weekend. I hope you're having a great start to your week, and I hope you are ready to jump into today's case with me. As you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are diving into the solved case of Mindy Morgenstern. This is a case that is absolutely tragic, it's horrifying, and it's one that definitely comes with its own twist at the end. So with that being said, let's jump right on into it today. Mindy Morgenstern was born on April 29th, 1984 in Bogota, Colombia, before she was adopted by her parents, Larry and Eunice Morgenstern. Mindy grew up in a tight-knit family alongside her three older siblings, living in New Salem, North Dakota. Mindy grew up on her family's farm. She was always outdoors, always exploring, and always running alongside her siblings. She was raised milking cows and raising chickens and doing all of the farm chores every single day, and she loved it. Mindy had her three siblings, like I said. She had her eldest sister, Rebecca, who was her parents' biological daughter, and then Larry and Eunice ended up adopting their remaining three children. They adopted their son Michael shortly after Rachel was born, and then there was a 10-year gap between when they adopted Mindy as well as Mindy's biological sister April. So you had four children altogether, three adopted, and two of those were also biological siblings. Now, Mindy was the kind of person who was said to light up a room the second she walked into it. I know we say that in these cases, and it's one of those things where people almost poke fun at the true crime community for saying, she was the light in the room, or whenever she walked in the room, she just exuded happiness and a positive energy. But Mindy really was that. She had a magnetic energy. She was bubbly, she was warm, and she was full of life. People were naturally drawn to Mindy, and she had the ability to make others feel seen, heard, and appreciated. She was known to be a girl's girl. She was always there for her girlfriends, looking out for them, whatever they needed, advice, a girls' night. She was always the right-hand girl for them. Mindy had a deep love for the arts and was especially passionate about singing and performing. She radiated positivity and left a lasting impression on everyone that she met. Now, while in high school, Mindy was involved in many extracurricular activities. She did track and field, she did cheerleading, she was involved in orchestra as well as a clarinetist. And after high school, Mindy was very excited when she got accepted into a Valley State University located in Valley City, North Dakota. Mindy was incredibly thrilled for this next chapter of life. She was majoring in physical education, and that was something she was very passionate about. She was super passionate about health and fitness, and a big reason for this was because when Mindy was a freshman in college, she was actually diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and because of this, it made her hyper aware of her health, and she chose not to shy away from her diagnosis. Instead, she really wanted to lean into it. She wanted to be a part of any and all clinical trials and hoped to help discover a cure and help others in the future who would also be affected by MS. Mindy had plans of graduating from college, being a health coach, and starting a family, and unfortunately, she never got the chance to do that. This case begins on September 13th of 2006, and at this time, Mindy was a senior in college and she was living on her own in an off-campus one-bedroom apartment at the Rosebud apartment complex, which was about a 5-minute walk away from campus. Now, this day started out like any normal day for Mindy. It was early fall, the weather was still warm outside, and a few of Mindy's friends had gone out that evening for some drinks, but Mindy did not go with. Her two friends, Tony and Danielle, had been out together drinking at the local bar when Tony's boyfriend at the time was persistently calling Tony's phone, asking Tony where she was, what she was doing, and wasn't happy that Tony was out that night. Now, in order to subdue the situation, Tony figured that she would tell her boyfriend that she was with Mindy. Now, the reason that she did this was because Mindy was known as the wholesome friend. She was known as the friend who was a good person. Nothing bad ever happened when Mindy was there. So Tony figured that by telling her boyfriend that she was with Mindy, it would somehow automatically make things better for her. And I really do think that that just goes to show the type of person that Mindy was. But Tony's boyfriend did not believe her at the time and asked for Tony to put Mindy on the phone. But of course, Mindy was not there to be able to get on that phone call. So instead, Tony and Danielle got in their car and drove over to Mindy's apartment, which was just a short drive away. Now, on the way over to Mindy's apartment, Tony was calling Mindy, calling, and not getting an answer. She was leaving voicemails for Mindy, and they were hoping, Tony and Danielle were, that once they got to Mindy's apartment, got Mindy on the phone with the boyfriend, that Mindy would also come out with them for the night. So yes, they wanted to go and get Mindy on the phone, but they also wanted to spend time with Mindy. Everyone wanted to spend time with Mindy. However, when Mindy was not answering her phone, they didn't really think too much of it. They just figured that they would see her when they arrived at the apartment. Now, once they arrived to the Rosebud complex, Tony walked in to apartment number 9, which was Mindy's unit, and noticed that the door was cracked open. At that point, Tony pushed open the door, and when she took a few steps into the apartment, she discovered Mindy lying on the floor in the middle of the apartment entryway. Now, even though Tony didn't get a good look at Mindy, it was a very quick look, she immediately knew something was wrong and ran out of the apartment and called out for Danielle to come inside. Now, once they were both inside, Danielle did recruit a neighbor who was also walking around the apartment complex to check on Mindy. It was a male neighbor of Mindy's, and they asked this male to go into Mindy's apartment and check her pulse, and when he did, he realized that it was too late and Mindy was gone. Now, Danielle and Tony immediately called 911, and police and paramedics arrived on the scene. When they arrived, they discovered Mindy laying on her back, dead. And when taking a first look at Mindy, police immediately thought that Mindy's murder was very clearly an overkill. They noticed that Mindy's neck had been sliced and the blade of the knife was still lodged in her throat. However, the handle had been broken off, so it was just the blade. Right next to Mindy's body was another knife that had also been broken, and there was a belt wrapped around Mindy's neck. Now, all throughout the apartment, there was a strong scent and smell of Pine Sol, the cleaning product, coming from inside Mindy's unit. Along with this, police also took a look around the apartment and noticed that this did not appear to be a robbery gone wrong. There was nothing taken from Mindy's apartment. Her purse, wallet, phone, all of her belongings were found inside of the unit undisrupted. Mindy was also discovered with all of her clothes on. There weren't tears in her clothes. It didn't look like there was a struggle there, which really did take out the theory for authorities initially that this was a sexual attack. Now, regarding Mindy's body, the investigators did discover that there appeared to be tissue underneath Mindy's fingernails, and this was a huge key piece of evidence in this case, and police were very much optimistic and hopeful that potentially they could recover any male DNA that was from Mindy's Mindy's killer underneath her fingernails. Something else that police noticed regarding Mindy's apartment was the fact that there were several picture frames that Mindy had scattered throughout the apartment, but several of the pictures in the picture frames were missing, which did raise the question to authorities of whether or not the killer took the pictures with them. And was this someone that was obsessed with Mindy? Was this someone that was stalking her and someone who took the pictures for that reason? Now, when the news of Mindy's murder initially broke to the public, again, this was a small town, so when everyone started to see the cop cars arriving to the apartment complex, everyone gathered around the complex trying to see what exactly had happened. Neighbors, friends, and people of the community gathered around the complex and in solidarity of Mindy. Police also spoke to Mindy's family, wanting to know if there was anyone that they could think of who would want to hurt Mindy. However, the family had no idea of anyone who would ever want to harm Mindy in this way. Now, in the start of this investigation, police wanted to retrace Mindy's steps. They thought it was very important for them to put together a timeline of what exactly happened and what Mindy was doing leading up to her murder. In doing this, police learned that Mindy's day on September 13th, like I mentioned earlier, started out very, very normal. She had gone to class earlier that day, and she was seen leaving campus at approximately 12:30 p.m. after her classes had ended. Police were able to see that Mindy did miss a phone call at 12:47 p.m. and that a neighbor of the apartment complex, or of Mindy's more so, had smelled the strong scent of pine sol at approximately 1 p.m. Police were confident that whoever killed Mindy used the pine sol to try and mask either the smell of a decomposing body or to get rid of any bacteria or DNA coming from the crime scene. So the pine sol is very important in this case and is a very big piece of key evidence and helped police put together this time frame, because now police were looking at a half-hour window of when they believe that the murder took place, and that was sometime between 12:30 p.m. and 1 p.m. on September 13th, and that timeline was confirmed by the medical examiner as well. Now, when police began conducting their interviews and speaking to people who they believe could have more information regarding Mindy's murder, the first person that they started speaking with was the man that Tony and Danielle called in to help them discover Mindy's body in her apartment, the one that they had asked to go check on Mindy for them. And that man was named Robert Linz. Now, Robert had only recently moved to Valley City several months prior to Mindy's murder, and he had moved from California. And once he moved to North Dakota, he obviously moved into the Rosebud apartment complex. Robert did claim that he only knew Mindy in passing. He had seen her walking around the complex before, and he also admitted that he did have a criminal history while he was living in California. He had been sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison after being charged with stealing a car, a firearm charge, and being found in possession of marijuana. All right, you guys, it's that time again. Let's talk about my favorite brand. Let's talk Skims. When creating any outfit, I think it's fair to say that a lot of us typically focus on what we're wearing on the outside and not what's underneath. I know typically when making an outfit, I would focus on making sure my jeans matched my top or that my shoes looked good with my dress. But then I discovered Skims, and let me tell y'all, it changed the game. I was now focused more on what I was wearing underneath, because the comfort and quality of Skims, it is absolutely unmatched, and I will never be going back. Putting on my Skims while getting dressed has now redefined my feel good, look good mentality. One of my favorite products of theirs is their Fits Everybody dipped front thong. This is the most comfortable article of clothing I have ever put on my body, hands down. I am not kidding. I swear to you that I have never bought another pair of underwear since trying these, and I don't plan on it. I never even knew that underwear could be this comfortable and this flattering. And when I pair it with a bra like the Fits Everybody push-up bra, you guys, it's game over. I never knew I could find a bra that looked as good as it felt, or vice versa. I always felt like I had to compromise, but once I found the Fits Everybody push-up bra, I have not looked back since. It gives me the perfect amount of lift without feeling heavy or bulky. Nothing is poking, there's nothing squeezing, or making me feel like I need to take it off halfway throughout the day. So shop my favorite bras and underwear at skims.com, and after you place your order, be sure to let them know that I sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. Robert claimed that when he went in to check on Mindy, he was very careful about touching her body and checking for her pulse. He claimed that he touched Mindy and checked her pulse with the back of his hand and not his fingers to avoid leaving any of his fingerprints on Mindy's body because he figured that police would have questions for him later on and did not want any of his DNA to be on Mindy's body for him later to be questioned or for his story to be questioned. Robert claimed that on the day of the murder, September 13th, he went to work at his job at a steel manufacturing plant and had his normal lunch break, which started at noon and lasted an hour, which did fall in to the time frame of when police believe the murder occurred. Now, despite some of the suspicion, Robert was very cooperative with police. He handed over his DNA and police let him go while awaiting the results and matching Robert's DNA to the DNA found underneath Mindy's fingernails. Now, the next person the police wanted to speak to in this case was Mindy's boyfriend. At the time of her murder, Mindy had been dating a man named Jordan Raynham. Jordan and Mindy had been together for over a year. They met while attending the same church, and Mindy and Jordan were said to be head over heels for each other. However, there were some people who believed that Jordan had some red flags about him. Family members of Mindy believed that Jordan was possessive, controlling, and jealous, but despite that, Jordan was very eager to talk to police following Mindy's murder. He was very cooperative. According to him, he said that the last time that he saw Mindy was on September 12th, the day before the murder, when the two of them went to the movies together and then went their separate ways at the end of the night. Jordan said the following morning on September 13th, he did have a phone call with Mindy at 10:45 a.m. However, that was the only time that they spoke that day. Jordan said that he did find it odd that that was the only time that they talked, considering the fact that Jordan said that him and Mindy spoke on the phone multiple times throughout the day. He said that Mindy was always blowing up his phone, always calling him. However, this was different. Jordan claimed that at the time of the murder, he was working on his family's farm, and he also took a polygraph test regarding his potential involvement. However, the results came back inconclusive on the test. It was said that Jordan was incredibly emotional and nervous during the test, which potentially could have altered the test results. Now, while Mindy's family did have some strong opinions about Jordan, friends of Mindy and Jordan said that they never believed that Jordan was involved in this or responsible whatsoever. They believed that for all things considered, Jordan was a very well-rounded man, and Jordan, similar to Robert, gave over his DNA for police and was let go after that conversation. Now, police also took a look at an ex-boyfriend of Mindy, and that was a man named Kyle Kuznia. Now, Kyle and Mindy had a tumultuous relationship over a 2.5-year span. They met while at Valley City University, and it was said that Mindy was head over heels for Kyle. However, the relationship did not last. It was said to be one of the more stereotypical toxic couple relationships. You had the fighting, you had the arguing, you had the adrenaline, the up and down. It was never dangerous or abusive or anything of that sort. However, it was your typical rocky relationship, and Mindy was said to be very invested in Kyle, while Kyle did not necessarily feel the exact same. Kyle claimed that the last time he saw Mindy was 7 months prior to her murder. She had gone over to his apartment one night, and it wasn't certain what the purpose of this meeting was or what exactly led up up to Mindy going over to Kyle's apartment. However, Kyle said that at some point during the night, some point during their conversation, he had asked Mindy to leave his apartment, to which she got very upset about and left in tears. Now, after Kyle and Mindy's relationship ended, there was someone on Kyle's side who remained in contact with Mindy, and that was Kyle's father, Rodney. Now, it has been said that Rodney and Mindy's relationship is very weird, just for a lack of a better word. It's just strange. It is odd, and a lot of people have questioned what the intentions on Rodney's side were for keeping in contact with Mindy. Mindy's friends claimed that after the relationship with Kyle ended, she wanted to keep in contact with Rodney in order to almost still have a connection with Kyle. Rodney was the link between Kyle and Mindy, and if Mindy couldn't be talking to Kyle, at least she could be talking to someone who was close enough to Kyle and really kind of still keep in his circle. Now, police did bring Rodney in for questioning, and Rodney claimed that initially, after Kyle and Mindy's relationship ended, the two spoke on the phone multiple times a day. They were speaking 24/7. However, over time, that lessened to about multiple times a week. Rodney claimed that he did enjoy speaking to Mindy. He told detectives that Mindy reminded him of his wife when they were younger. However, he did view the relationship as more of a father-daughter relationship. However, the detectives who were hearing Rodney's explanation did feel otherwise. Rodney would make special trips to go see Mindy in Valley City. Like I said, he was speaking to her multiple times a day at one point, and even after the murder, Rodney continued calling Mindy and leaving voice messages as his way of going through the grieving process. Now, for all of these persons of interest, Robert, Jordan, Kyle, and Rodney, all of their alibis checked out. Police confirmed all of their alibis, and they were able to, again, like I said, confirm that they all were where they said they were around the time of the murders. And along with that, none of their DNAs matched the DNA underneath Mindy's fingernails, so they were now back to square one. And they also realized that the missing photos from Mindy's apartment, that was actually nothing suspicious or related to the case at all. It turns out Mindy was putting together photos for a modeling gig that she had booked, so she was using the photos from the picture frames. So that was Mindy herself doing that. So essentially, everything that police had initially looked at was proving to be a dead end, and the anxiety of the community, especially Mindy's neighbors, was only growing when they realized that this was not an open and shut case as they were hoping for. They were hoping that police would automatically know who did this. There would be answers, someone would be arrested, and Mindy would finally have justice. However, it was proving to be a longer process than that. However, this is when the crime lab came back to detectives and said that they had created a DNA profile for the DNA found underneath Mindy's fingernails. The crime lab also informed authorities that the DNA had also been linked to an unsolved aggravated rape case from the Fargo, North Dakota area. Now, the survivor in that case gave police a description of her attacker when her attack took place. She described her attacker as a tall African-American man who was very muscular. Now, with this description, police then started going through the Valley City area, asking people if they knew anyone who matched that description. And that is when police started getting a name consistently. When asking other civilians this question, people in the community, they said that they did know someone who matched that description, and that person actually lived in Mindy's apartment complex, and that would be a 34-year-old man named Mo Gibbs. Mo Gibbs was actually a correctional officer living in the same apartment complex as Mindy alongside his pregnant wife and their 1-year-old daughter. Police learned that Mo grew up in Central California, and when he turned 18, he joined the Navy, and after that, he began a college basketball career. Now, while in California, Mo did get married and had children. However, he then got divorced and moved to Valley City, where he met met Chrissy. Now, when Mo met Chrissy, she was already pregnant at the time. However, she claimed that Mo loved her daughter as his own. So when I referred to the 1-year-old daughter, that was not Mo's biological daughter. However, it was his stepdaughter who Chrissy said that he treated as his own. Now, when moving to Valley City, Mo started working as a college security guard before getting a job as a correctional officer for the Valley City jail. Now, when police started to realize that Mo was a person of interest in this case, they were shocked. And they were shocked because they were all familiar with Mo. All of the detectives, all the investigators, they knew of Mo. This was the community. This was the brotherhood of the police. They knew Mo and they worked alongside him. Mo had actually previously given a witness statement to authorities as he was a neighbor of Mindy's. And when the murder happened, police obviously were getting witness statements from neighbors, and Mo was one of those people. They also had the neighbors hand over DNA samples, which they did, including Mo. So police had Mo's DNA sample. And so because of that, they sent Mo's DNA sample off to the crime lab to see if it was a match. And a week after Mindy's murder, the crime lab came back and confirmed that Mo's DNA was a match to the DNA under Mindy's fingernails and to that unsolved aggravated rape case in Fargo. Now, because of how shocked everyone was at these results, the crime lab ran the results a second time just to double check and confirm. And it was confirmed once again. There was no mistake. The DNA was Mo's. So at this point, police now put together a plan of how they were going to approach Mo. They asked him to go down to the police department to answer some follow-up questions regarding the murder, and he agreed to do so. Police framed this as they were continuing to speak to neighbors of Mindy's to try and not make Mo suspicious of anything. Mo even brought his 1-year-old stepdaughter to the meeting with him. That is how nonchalant he was about this. But after his stepdaughter was taken aside, police sat down with Mo in the interrogation room and asked Mo where he was during the time of the murder. Mo told authorities that at 11:30 on September 13th, he left the apartment with his daughter to go have lunch with Chrissy on her lunch break. He said that they were done around 12:35. He dropped Chrissy back off at work and then went back home with his stepdaughter. Mo claimed that he got home sometime between 12:45 and 1 p.m. and didn't notice anything unusual at the time other than the smell of pine sol. Now, Mo and Chrissy were in the process of moving to their in-laws' house. This process was actually expedited after Mindy's murder because Chrissy was so nervous and afraid and anxious to live in the same apartment complex that an unsolved murder took place in, which is very ironic. But Mo said that because of this, he spent the afternoon moving some things over to the in-laws' house and stayed there for approximately an hour before returning home. Now, Mo said that in regards to Mindy, he was familiar with her. He saw her about a week prior to the murders, and he actually claimed that he had been in her apartment before. He claimed that about a week prior, when he last saw Mindy asked Mo to help him carry her laundry basket into her apartment, which Mo agreed to do. Mo was also able to give a description of the state of Mindy's apartment and what it looked like at the time, and police said that the positioning of everything that Mo mentioned, where he said the laundry basket was, where he said the shoes were, where he said Mindy's purse was, that was all in the exact same locations that they were found in after Mindy's body was discovered, which police thought could possibly be very telling. Now, at this point, police broke the news to Mo. They told him that his DNA had been recovered under Mindy's fingernails. But of course, Mo denied this. He claimed that there was no way for this to be true and that he had nothing to do with her death. Now, police also confronted Mo about the unsolved rape case in Fargo, and while Mo did admit to living in Fargo at the time that it took place, he said that he was not responsible for that either, but police were not buying it, and they had enough evidence to go ahead and arrest Mo, which they did. Now, when Mo's wife heard of his arrest, Chrissy was in absolute shock. Chrissy said initially that she did not think Mo was capable of anything like that. However, she immediately divorced him him and always has stood behind the victims. Now, DNA does not lie, and Mo's charges were not stopping after his arrest. After word of his arrest was made public, 5 other female victims came forward and accused Mo of sexual assault while they were incarcerated at the jail that Mo worked at. So this was former inmates that were coming forward. So these were former inmates that were coming forward and accusing Mo. So he was also charged additionally with those 5 other assaults. Now you might be wondering how Mo was able to pass as getting a job as a correctional officer, and that was because he had actually given his employer a false name. Mo changed his name. Mo's real name is Glenn Dale Morgan Jr. And when police realized this, they discovered that Mo had previously served time in prison for 5 years for a drive-by shooting that he had been a part of while he was in the Navy. Now, leading up to the trial, Mo pled guilty to 7 sexual assault charges. So he pled guilty to all of the sexual assault charges against him. However, he pled not guilty to Mindy's murder, and he was headed to trial, which began in July of 2007. Now, alongside the DNA evidence against Mo, the prosecution also pointed out Mo's cell phone activity around the time of the murder. Mo was notoriously known for being on his phone, texting, searching things on his phone, things of that nature. However, on September 13th at approximately 12:30 p.m., all of his cell phone activity came to a halt for approximately an hour before it resumed itself. This stood out to police because, again, 12:30 was exactly around the time that it was believed that Mindy had been murdered. Now, along with that, there was a former cellmate of Mo's while he was awaiting trial that came forward and claimed that after Mo's arrest, Mo had admitted to Mindy's murder while awaiting for his trial. So he admitted to his cellmate that he had murdered Mindy. Now, as far as a motive, the prosecution theorized that Mo had seen Mindy, they had crossed paths on the day of September 13th, and that Mo had followed Mindy into her apartment for a sexual purpose. They believed that Mo had tried to make a move onto Mindy. Mo tried to make a pass at Mindy. However, when Mindy turned him down, that is when Mo flew into a fit of rage and immediately began attacking and strangling her. Now, the defense, on the other hand, the defense claimed that Mo was being framed for a crime he did not commit. They stated that Mo's DNA, while it was found underneath Mindy's fingernails, it was not found on any other part of her body, and it was also not found on the knife, which was the murder weapon. In fact, there were 2 other unknown male DNAs that were found on the knife instead, neither of which were Mo's, which is very interesting. They also stated that there was a male hair found in the palm of Mindy's hand. However, that was not Mo's either. So keep that in mind. Defense also brought up an expert who claimed that Mo's DNA very easily could have been transferred onto Mindy's fingernails through touching the same objects throughout the apartment complex, whether that be the door handle or the stair railing or a doorknob, something of that sort. It could have transferred onto Mindy's body throughout touching the same objects. Now, the defense also argued that the jailhouse roommate of Mo's, who was claiming that Mo had confessed to him of the murder, this inmate had an extensive rap sheet and was known for giving false confessions. So who knows if he was really telling the truth or not. Now, the deliberations after the trial lasted for 4 days. 4 jurors thought that Mo was guilty. However, 6 jurors thought that Mo was not guilty, and the jury could not come to a decision. So there was no verdict, but the prosecution was adamant that they were going to try Mo again, and he did remain in prison leading up to the second trial because of the time that he was serving for the 7 sexual assault charges. Now, the second trial was held on October of 2007, and the big change in this case was that the prosecution brought in an expert that testified that the amount of DNA under Mindy's fingernails could only be from excessive physical contact. So it would have had to have been from some sort of struggle, some sort of personal physical contact, not just touching the same objects. suspects. Now, the defense again argued that Mo's DNA was not found on the murder weapons, and the same testimonies were made, and now it was in the hands of the jury. But ultimately, this time, the jury found Mo Gibbs guilty of the murder of Mindy Morgenstern. Mo Gibbs was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently being held in the North Dakota State Penitentiary in Bismarck, North Dakota. He attempted to appeal his case in 2008, stating that there was not enough evidence to convict him. However, it was unsuccessful, but to this day, Mo has always denied his involvement. And that, you guys, is really this case. I'm so curious to hear what you have to say about this one, because while I do believe that it is, very telling that Mo's DNA was found underneath the fingernails, I'm wondering whose DNA was found on the knife. It just leads me to more questions. Were those knives Mindy's knives? Did they belong to someone else? Whose DNA was found on them? Whose hair was found in Mindy's palm? Why was there a hair found in Mindy's palm? Was there any screaming? Did anyone hear any sort of struggle coming from Mindy's apartment? I just have a lot of more questions, but let me know what your thoughts are. And with that being said, you guys, it's going to be all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another exclusive episode of Killer Instinct here on Patreon. Make sure you guys tune in tomorrow, because tomorrow we are covering the infamous Idaho 4 case. We're doing it. We're covering it. I haven't done it thus far. We're doing it now. So make sure you tune into that. I will see you guys there. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.